Happy New Year, guys. Happy New Year's Eve. Why don't you just turn to somebody like fist bump somebody next to you guys. It's good to see familiar faces and old faces and new faces, and really grateful that you guys are calling this place home or at least visiting us and traveling through for those of you guys that are just in Korea for a short tick. As Isaac kind of shared, it is it's kind of wild for us. Our church, I think we just finished our 12-week, and so that's like 3 months. And so we launched in mid-October, and our church has been journeying together. Thanks, I appreciate that, Alice. Alice clapped. Can we clap? Hey, 2.5, 3 months, come on. Woo, woo. And God has truly been so faithful, honestly. Like, we started in January. Some of the core team were with us, but it was just like a random group of strangers that had come in January, and we prayed every month. And as we prayed every month, God brought different faces, and just God kind of brought the group together, matured the group, and then leading up to October, we met every week, and through that, God brought a really beautiful service for our launch, and we've just been kind of running with it. We've been rolling with it, and to think that we're at the last day of the year, it's really wild. And yeah, I mean, I could talk a whole lot about just kind of the whole journey of like how God brought our church together, but I think it would take a while. And we're in our last 10 hours of 2023, and I want to kind of flip it on you a little bit right now. Like, what are some of the significant markers? What are some of the significant milestones of your year in 2023? What are some of the mountains that you've had to climb? What are some of the major transitions? Having this time, and especially like on New Year's Eve, to have like, normally you have a New Year's service, and we might not have church on Sunday on the last day of the year. Maybe we go out, enjoy the city. We get to do the countdown. So we do like other activities, and maybe you'll do that after church today. But I think a real advantage for us to have this service here today is that we get to reflect in the house of the Lord how God has brought us, the markers, the steps. What are the things that God has really taught you this year through everything that He has brought you through? I'm not much of a journaler, but I do write notes on my phone. And if you do that already, or maybe you don't, but as things are coming up for you, maybe jot them down. As we kind of set our hearts and reset our hearts here, what are some of the things that God wants you to remember for next year? Sometimes in life, we can find ourselves going the wrong way, or it feels the wrong way. Or maybe sometimes in life we feel like we're going the right way, but the right way doesn't feel right anymore. You feel like, man, there's just a struggle to stay in the middle of that path and to stay within that process. And sometimes the hardest parts of our journey is when we're staying in the middle part of the journey. God's spoken to you before. God has said, go to this job. God has said, go to Seoul. God has led you to this place so far. But then for some reason in the middle of the journey, that voice you felt was so clear before feels a little bit more distant. And the surroundings and the circumstances around your life feel more loud. And oftentimes we can find ourselves in the journey of life, maybe in the middle part, or maybe at the beginning, feeling lost and wondering, where am I meant to go? The reality is, I think much of our life, we can give our best time, our best efforts. We can give all of our hearts to peoples, to careers, to the pursuit of different things, to money, happiness, a good future. But we can find ourselves in a place where we're rather empty and feeling like our pursuit and searching of those things did not lead us to where we should be. And so we're kind of launching into a new series. We've been doing the Advent series. And through the Advent series, we've been looking at the redemptive theme. But today, we're kind of opening up a new series for the next month. And the new series is called Reconnect. Can you guys help me today? Can you say reconnect? Reconnect. And so it's got two meanings. So the theme for our next year is going to be reconnect. And that means to Like obviously the first meaning of reconnecting with God, reconnecting with community, reconnecting with the city. But the second meaning is like reconnect, real connections. And so we're focusing on connecting in a real way with God, with community, and with the city. So real connections, reconnect is our next theme. And I want to kind of hit this tension point from our passage today. The tension point in our passage today is that these travelers are traveling away from Jerusalem. Now, these travelers are disciples of Jesus. They know Jesus, they follow Jesus, they saw his miracles, they heard his teaching, and they saw him die on the cross. And so the man that they followed and hoped in had a tragic ending, the worst ending possible for a man in the crucifixion. And because of that, these travelers are now walking away from Jerusalem and going a different direction to a village called Emmaus. They are walking away from where Jesus is, and in some senses, they feel like they're going the wrong way. They're going a different way. They're on a detour. And the crazy thing about our passage today is in verse 13, and it says that the very day the two of them were going to the village named Emmaus, about 7 miles from Jerusalem, in verse 14, and they were talking with each other about all these things that had happened. While they were talking and discussing together, Jesus himself drew near and went with them. Jesus joins them on the road the other way. As they are walking away from where Jesus was, from Jerusalem, Jesus himself joins them on their path. We know from this passage today that they were dejected and sad. They were brokenhearted. Their hope was crushed. Jesus had died. Their Messiah and hope was gone. And they were going back to what they knew. They were going back to their hometown. And it's in this place that Jesus joins them on their journey. Jesus joins them on the road as they're walking away. In verse 16, it says, "But their eyes were kept from recognizing him. And he said to them, 'What is this conversation that you are holding with each other as you walk?' And they stood still, looking sad." They couldn't recognize that it was Jesus on the road. They couldn't see that Jesus was with them, engaging with them, walking with them. Jesus says, what conversation are you guys having? What's going on? What are you guys talking about? I want to know. I want to hear. And it's in this moment as he engages in conversation with them, they're incredibly sad. Verse 8 says, one of them, the name of the disciple says, named Cleopas, said, "Are you the only visitor to Jerusalem who does not know the things that has happened there in these days?" And he said to them, "What things?" And they said to them, "Concerning Jesus of Nazareth, a man, a prophet, mighty in deed and word before God and all the people." And so in this conversation with a stranger, they are unpacking all of the things that have been on their hearts. Have you ever been in a situation where you've shared too much to a stranger than you expected to? Have you ever been in a conversation with a stranger where you shared a little bit too much of your personal situation? Have you had somebody else share their life to you and you're just buying a burger from their store? You know what I'm saying? We were in Busan. We were living in Busan before we moved up to Seoul. And we found out in January that we would use this church building. And so for us, it was like a real step-by-step process. So we're like, okay, maybe we'll find a place near our church to live. This area, for those of you guys that are local, know that it's quite like central and it's quite expensive, quite middle of the city, you know. And so I was just kind of walking. And I was very kind of low because we were commuting up from Busan every month to hold the prayer meetings. And we have 2 little young ones. And so it was quite a strain. And so I was kind of low. 4 months, we were looking for a place. We couldn't find anything. Then I walked down this street, just in my thoughts. And then I look up suddenly. I'm like, "God, will you provide a house for us?" And then I look up, and there's this like light real estate in Korean, right? Light, and the light was really bright. And so I went in, I'm like, oh my gosh, is this the Lord? I was like praying, and then this light, it sounds Christian, and then I went in there, and I'm like, I struck up a conversation with a lady, and I'm like, hey, how you doing? Like, I'm looking for a house. And then I saw like a cross inside, and I'm like, is this you, God? I'm like, I feel like this is you. But what ended up happening was this lady started to share all about when she found out that I was a pastor, that we were coming to plant a church. She, like, for an hour, just shared her life. And she wept. At one point, talking about her family, talking about her children, and kind of the brokenness that she'd experienced in her life. There are times in our life where we feel it's easier and safer to share what's going on, the deep pain, the heartbreak, the heartache that we carry sometimes. It's easier to share that with a stranger. It's easier to share it when there isn't a sense of like, there will be consequences for my vulnerability. And so I thought about this moment, and it's like on the road to Emmaus, we see these two strangers, these two disciples walking with this stranger, and they decide to unpack. All Jesus needed to do was prod, and from their hearts came out all of the things that had made them sad. They stood still, and they could not hide their sadness. What sort of conversation would you have with a stranger or with somebody if you felt that there was no expectation of judgment? What are some of the things that you're carrying in your life right now where if you had full safety, you could be vulnerable and share about the struggles and hardships or the disappointments in your life? We're living in a tremendous time, like a time of tremendous change in our day. We're more interconnected than we've ever been before. We have information at our fingertips. We have communication with our loved ones. We can FaceTime. We can interact in so many different ways. But despite our interconnectedness, we're living in a time where we are more starved and lacking deep connection and intimacy with people around us. There are more issues and mental issues of depression, all kinds of attention deficit orders. We're going through so many things. The modern soul is being bombarded with something like candy for our souls, right? We have these frivolous and a lot of chatter and a lot of noise and information, yet in our hearts and in our souls, we're more fractured and isolated and disconnected than we've ever been before. These disciples were walking away, and they were hurt and they were broken. And I want us to catch this, how Jesus engages with them. He engages as a stranger. He engages them on the road as they're walking away. It kind of breaks every understanding that we have, or sense of understanding that we have about who God is and what the Christian faith might be. From the outside looking in, we feel like God is this God that wants these things from us, has a checklist, moral duties. We have to do this and that. And if we don't do that, we feel like, oh man, God's not happy with me. And so we kind of hide that part of us. We have hard issues that happen and heart issues that happen in our life. But how many times have we been kind of open in the church and maybe we've been hurt, we haven't felt safe. And so at church, we don't even open up what's really going on inside. And it's this cycle of man, I'm going through depression, I'm going through hardship, can't share it with God, can't share it with people. And it's sometimes it's just really hard to articulate pain that's buried in the heart. But what's even harder is you know how to articulate it, but don't find the space to be able to share it. What if I'm scared of sharing it at church? What if I'm scared of what this person will say or this work person will say? And we live our lives in a modern world. We have pseudo connection with everyone. We feel like we have connection with everyone, yet we don't have a deep connection with the most important person. And we don't have deep connections with one another as well. And so my heart, I think, for the theme this year is that through authenticity and being real before God, being real with myself and being real in community, that God would really reconnect us in a vibrant way where we would be a community that's connected to God, connected to one another, and connected to the city. And so it's a journey of entering into greater honesty, I think, to allow my fear, my guilt, and my shame, and all the knots and gunk that's in my heart to unravel and to be exposed. If wounds are not exposed, they fester. If wounds are not exposed to the air and given what's necessary, they will be infected. If I repress my pain, it will leave me with internal bleeding. It will leave me with a broken soul. It will break my ability, it will desensitize me, and it will hamper my ability to connect with God and to the people around us. To recognize pain and hurt and to open ourselves freely, it takes risk, but it's a risk worth taking. Without taking this risk, how can we have a Christian faith that has substance and that matures? How can we develop our spirituality if we're not willing to be fully honest with God and with those that we walk with in our lives? The things that are hidden must be exposed for the healing to begin. What does it mean to be real in this season? I want us to kind of ponder upon that. What does it mean to open areas that are hidden, areas that are broken, areas that have been burdens, things that we've been carrying this year that maybe we haven't shared with anybody else? Jesus met these two disciples as they were walking away, and he walked with them. He didn't impose his identity, his authority. He just walked with them. He engaged in conversation. What are you talking about? What's on your heart? What's really there? Let's talk. He meets us even when we feel distant from him, where we feel like our direction is not set in our life, don't know what's next. He meets us on the road home from church as you leave this place. He meets us in the moments where we feel broken and dejected and lonely, where we feel like failures, when we look. Maybe for some of us, man, New Year's Eve is always this moment or day where you just get reminded that all the promises and hope that you had at the beginning of the year shattered and it did not measure up. And maybe you just feel discouraged, but God is there with you. He's with you, and he says, hey, I'm still here. Adam and Eve's first reaction post-fall was that they hid and they covered. In the gospel, we have the grace and the unconditional love of God to come out into the open as we are. Because we're fully accepted, fully loved in our nakedness and shame, we can be disciples of Jesus who are known, loved, and sent and called. And so our vision and our mission, and I think because we're end of year, I'm sharing a little bit of like my vision and kind of theme as well, like kind of putting it in there a little bit. But our mission is to be disciples of the way who are known, know, and go. And so we believe that in the intersection of Seoul, that we have a really prime opportunity for believers to come into the presence of God, to hear the word of God, to be reminded of who they are in Jesus, to be known, and then for them to grow in their knowledge of God, in the knowledge of themselves, and in community, they're able to grow, and then ultimately be launched out into the mission of God, the Great Commission, that is to go and make disciples of all nations. And so we believe that disciples of Jesus in the intersection of Seoul can be made. And I just want to say that there are so many sojourners that come through this way. And that's what excites me. And that's what excites our team, that there are so many people on the way, on the journey. They're on the path. It doesn't have to look perfect, but to be reminded that Jesus is a God that loves to walk with you. He's a God that loves to walk with his people. He loves to walk with people and help them process their pain, their hardships, their questions. They're just willing to be a safe space to hear and listen to you. As you come out of hiding and open yourself up to Jesus, he is not going to discipline you or rebuke you. He may, but he will love you in that. He will do it out of love. He may rebuke you if the way that you are living your life is not good for you, but in the way that he leads and he engages with us, it's never just a pure rebuke and a discipline. In the gospel, we have no need. The good news is good because we no longer have to hide. We no longer have to cover. We no longer have to fight and grasp and try to figure it out and build it in our own strength. We can just come out as we are and be fully loved, fully known, fully accepted. Our souls can be embraced in a space where we come out in all our flaws, our dysfunctions, and we're received not by our works and our merits, but by his grace and his grace alone. The gospel is the good news because we are fully known and loved just as we are. And that is not just at the point of our salvation, but it is all throughout. Until the time we meet Jesus, we will continue to be known and loved, fully embraced by God's grace, not by our own merit. This is good news. Can I get an amen, church? Amen. That whatever we're going through, we don't have to go through it alone. We're fully safe in his love, fully known. We have an alternate path to the path that the world lays out to us. The world lays out a path where we clamor, where we get anxious, we grasp, we manipulate, we flex, we make our strategy and we execute it. We do all that we can in our own strength to secure what I need for myself. But in the gospel, it's a different way. It's a relational way. It's a deeper relationship that God invites us into. Why else would Jesus join them on this path? It's not about the destination. It's about journeying with us in relationship. He wants to know us. He wants us and him. He wants it to be real and authentic. But sometimes I come to God and I'm like, I got to pray today, right? It's a checklist. Sometimes we come to God and we say, the Lord's Prayer. And we have the automated, if you've grown up in church, you know how to pray. And I could put on a good pastor voice and, I could do it. I'll pray. Yeah, I'll pray. I'll frown my brows. I'll pray, right? And it's like sometimes we pray, but it's not real. It's not what I'm really going through. And I want to share with you guys just a vulnerable piece. There's been markers in my life. When I met Jesus, I had journeyed far from, I was definitely like, not this, in this passage today, it's like 7 miles out to Emmaus, but I was like 100 miles out from Jesus. I was far out from Jesus. I was lost in a cycle of depression. I was abusing substances. I was like 17, and I just really went off the deep end. I grew up in church, and then there was just a lot of pain that had built up inside of my heart. A lot of just bitterness. I felt like I was missing out. And I'm like, why do I have to live a Christian? I didn't feel like I had a choice. And so when I got to 17, I graduated from high school, I was just like, freedom! And then I just went out into the world. I just remember these markers because when God met me, tears flowed. When I finally met Jesus 4 years down the line, in the mire of my mess, in the pit of my despair, I was really contemplating suicide when God met me when I was 21. And I just remember coming to a worship service and they were sharing a testimony. The preacher was sharing a testimony. And through the testimony, my heart cracked open, if that makes sense. My heart opened to God. And it opened to God because for me, I felt like there's no way that God or anyone can understand what I've gone through. I'm alone. And so for me, my heart was closed. But when this testimony was being shared by this preacher, I remember thinking, if God can save someone like him, God can save someone like me. And it was the first time that I'd heard a testimony that was similar to my life. And I was just like, man, like something in my heart just opened, and like a flood, the love of God filled my heart, my dry soul. And I felt so filled by his love in that moment that all the addictions that I had dropped off like this. I haven't gone back. It's like I've been like one-way Jesus since when I was 21 from that moment. And what happened there was I cried and I cried and I cried and I wept. It was like not just one night. It was like a season of weeping. I cried every church service to the point where I remember my youngs, older guys would be like, "You crying again, bro?" Like they were like mind blown that I was getting wrecked at every service. I was just crying because words don't do justice. When things have been trapped inside my soul, I stuff it, I repress it, I just respond, I just get reactionary, I just live my life with my chest out, and I go, you know, screw the world. I'm going to live my life, and I'm going to take care of myself. And that was kind of where I was. And when God came into that little hole, that little cracked open door of my heart, the only appropriate response as I opened my heart to God, as it was filled and as it opened more, as it filled up, I felt my heart just opening to God. The only response was tears. Another moment for me was not too many years ago. I one-way Jesus, right? So I was one-way Jesus. I was like on fire. Like I was like Super Saiyan, like Jesus, right? Yellow hair. I was just like everything Jesus. Street event. Like I was like at church as much as I can. And then for some reason, God opened up the opportunity to go to the States. And so it was a big step of faith for me to go out to America. And so I stepped out in faith. From a beautiful community, I took a step of faith. I didn't know where I was going. I bought the plane ticket first before the visa. And so I was like, God, if I'm going, then you're going to give me this visa within a month. The visa came 2 days before my flight. And so I ended up selling everything, giving my car away within 2 days, and I was gone. And God took me on this journey. I lived in America for 10 years. I went to seminary in Orange County. And I lived just so intensely for Jesus, like all out for Jesus, like giving my life to Jesus. I'm willing to give up anything. I said, God, whatever you want to do, like wherever you want to send me, whatever it costs, I'll do it. For 10 years, I'll do it, God. If it'll prepare me for the next 10 years and the next 10 years, I'm down. Like I was like so like doggone, like I'm going to do it, determined to live my life for Jesus in such a way where it wasn't like what I had done growing up, where church was just church. I wanted to live my life, if Jesus is real, to give my life to him. Fast forward 8 years. I've been working, K-Town. I'm a pastor. I'm ordained. I'm married. And in all my spiritual zeal and zest, all my energy, my 20s, I poured it out to this Korean church in K-Town. And like I would come and preach, and kids straight up like I prepare all week. I'm like trying to like give my best. And this one kid, bro, never fails, just sleeping. And like you're just preaching, and this guy just try not to look at him, but he's like decked out like this. And like K-Town kids, they were very hurt. Their hearts were closed. And so I'm preaching to closed hearts every week, no matter what. I'm not seeing fruit. But I'm like, God, wherever you call me, I'll stay. And I'm serving. And I just get to the end of myself. The reason why I share this is I served at this one church for 7 years, 7 full years, almost like going on into 8. And I was just really broken. I was tired. I was like, in what I could do, I had tried it all. Like I hit a wall, and I'm like, I'm not doing this no more. And then I sleep, and then I come back. I'm like, God, if you're not calling me out, I'll do it. And it's like so many mental, emotional barriers that I had to just jump over to stay there. I still get it. I did not plan to get emotional on this sermon, okay? But I was just there, and I just remember, the reason why I share this is that there was heartbreak. Even when we're following Jesus, there is heartbreak. There is burdens that we carry. And I'd realized that I was serving God and I was doing things for God, but I wasn't talking to God. I'm just, all right, you called me to a God. I got you. I'm doing it. I'm like a bull. I feel just hitting this cement. I'm going. You want me to go? I'll go. And I thought that God had called me to this meant I just do it. But when I ended my time at this church, I was so broken. I remember going to a pastor's conference, and it was a ministry time for pastors, and he was talking about the sacred wounds of being a pastor, being in ministry. That what if wounds were a part of it? What if carrying hurt is a part of it, being a pastor? And it was very timely word. And I just remember going to the altar and getting down on my knees, and I was praying. And I said 2 words. I don't want to say the 2 words because I feel like I'll cry, but I just said, it hurt. For the first time, I acknowledged I was real. I opened my pain, real pain, to God. And tears flowed that day, like just. How God, He waits for those moments, I think. He's patiently waiting. He doesn't pressure us because I think He waits for our time. But when we are real to God, He holds us in that. He allows us to heal in that. We can live out our lives for God, or we might be on the wrong path, but wherever we are, might be on the middle of the road. God, He walks with us. He never leaves us. He actually joins us. It says He drew near to them on the path. He draws nearer to us when we are on that path walking away. When we are raw and real in our brokenness before God, it's counted to God. It's counted to us as righteousness. You know, in David's, it says, a broken and contrite heart you shall not despise. Sacrifices you did not require. God doesn't require sacrifices from us. But our God, He wants our hearts. He wants our honesty. He wants our real frustrations. He wants our anger and even our cuss words. A professor at our seminary says, cuss words have become the modern sacred words. We're not afraid of saying OMG and just using God's name, but when it comes to cuss words, it's like a sacred thing. We think twice. And it's like, sometimes in our anger, we might cuss. God can handle that. Sometimes in our anger, in our frustration, we feel like we shouldn't open that up because it's messy, but God can handle that. What does it look like to reconnect to God in this next season? You may have many different New Year's resolutions. You might have a lot of goals and things that you guys want to accomplish this next year. But I want to just exhort you and encourage you today here in this place. One thing, bring your real self to God this year. Commit to being real with God this year. Whatever is in your heart, whatever is in your journey, whatever is in your day, let it out and open it to God. Know that He's with you. Know that He's for you. Know that He has not abandoned you. No matter where you feel like your direction in life is, you might be feeling like you're going the opposite direction. But open yourself and be raw and be real with God. And you'll find that God is right there with you in the midst of all of that. And so, just going to invite the worship team to come up. And just, if you would close your eyes with me, just to keep our hearts just set on Him. What are the things that you have carried for a while? Disappointments, maybe even a pain that comes from relationships, from your closest loved ones, maybe from church, maybe from previous churches, communities, where they've shunned you and rejected you when you opened up. When your mess came out, they rejected you and they shunned you. Maybe even in your family, you've been going through a hard time and you felt like in the moment that you needed people the most, they shunned you and they rejected you. Maybe for some of us, there's some real raw pain from close friendships breaking down. Betrayal, back-talking, gossiping. Friends not understanding that our life is a journey and there's constant change. They couldn't understand what changes you were going through and they turned their back on you. Maybe for some of us in this room, we have been serving God with all of our hearts and we just feel empty and low. And we don't feel like God is actively working in our lives despite all that we've done for God and for those around us. What are some of the hopes? We all carry disappointments, fallen expectations. I believe that Jesus on this last day of the year is coming alongside you right now. He's sitting down at the pew, putting his arms around you and saying, hey, what's going on? What's up? What's on your mind? So can we just spend a moment here, church? Just spend a moment here, just allowing the Lord to engage with us and for us to engage with Him in realness and